Is it like a little activity we can quickly do?
Yeah, absolutely. We could
Okay.
do a real simple breathwork technique if you like.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
close your eyes, feet shoulder width apart. We're just going to do 4, 2, 6. So you're going to take a nice big deep inhale through the nose for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 1, 2. Exhale slowly through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 4, 2, 6. Again, in 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 1, 2. X 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One more time. Hold. Inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 1. Exhale through the mouth. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. And there we go.
How good does that feel?
I didn't do it because I was counting for you.
I know.
How good do you feel?
I feel so good, bro. Like it's so insane what breath work can do for you. Like,
Breath is medicine, my
dude,
friend.
it's unbelievable. Like I feel honestly like it's amazing how something like that can make you feel almost like a little bit stoned in like
Yeah.
such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Like wow.
Yeah, Eckhart Tolle once said, one conscious breath in and out is a meditation. So literally just going like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what happened there? Nothing. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Epic.
Yeah,
So
man.
epic. Okay. Whoa. Let's get this party started, baby. Okay. Welcome to the All Rounder Performance Podcast with myself, Damien Schechter. I'm unbelievably happy to have you here today. Joining us on today's episode, it's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to be talking about all things health, sports, fitness, performance optimization. I actually have a very dear friend of mine, someone that has absolutely changed my life since we met last year, August. His name is Martin O'Toole, and he is an author. He is a retreat facilitator, a podcaster, and a dear friend of mine that I'm very excited to be sitting at this table with. So, Martin, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, brother. I suppose we are talking about health, but we're talking about mental and spiritual health instead.
Yeah, that's it. So, we obviously we met at the reading of How to Die Happy, which is your book, which I'm very excited to be diving into today. I think I'll actually maybe hand over to you, and maybe you can just give us a little bit of background as to who you are, where you're from, what you do. Obviously, we've spoken a little bit about that in the intro, but let's just elaborate on that.
Yeah, okay. I don't particularly like talking about myself. Well,
You wrote a book on it, dude. So
well,
yeah,
that was about you and everybody else as well,
yeah.
I suppose. Yeah, I was in the advertising industry for nearly 25 years, and running parallel with that, I was a very good, high functioning alcoholic and drug addict and sex addict and drama addict and a self harmer and an other harmer, displaying an awful lot of narcissistic personality disorder traits also. Although I was never diagnosed, but then ironically, a lot of people with that disorder are never diagnosed because an irony of being a narcissist is you don't know you're a narcissist, so why would you seek treatment for it? And I was also supremely depressed to the point of suicidal ideation, and I hit rock bottom probably in around 2015, loaded a double barrel shotgun, pointed it at my face, and got ready to blow my brains out. And my beagle walked in the door and talked me out of it, which is, there's a chapter in the book, as you know, called Last Night a Beagle Saved My Life. And I think that's probably, no, it's definitely one of the key moments, that, when something's going to change. I mean, you get to the point where that's it. Depression has beaten you and you're on your way out. Loading the gun, I had a bottle of gin already inside me, and I was ready to go. I absolutely couldn't stand myself. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of this messy metamorphosis, this beautiful process of realizing who I'd become, unlearning that, which is a process on its own, and then onboarding forgiveness, onboarding self-love, onboarding the ability then to connect with myself in a healthy way, so that I could then do that externally. Excuse me. Fast forward to
This was in the UK.
Yeah, this was in the UK.
Okay.
I'd been sober for about a year, 2018 up to 2019, but I was experiencing a great deal of pressure. I had a business, an advertising agency in London. I was experiencing ludicrous, when you get, I don't know if you've ever been so stressed that you start to get manic.
Yeah.
And you're really snapping, you're biting people's heads off.
Yeah.
It's burnout, right?
Yeah.
And this was burnout number 3 for me. And I was in that whole place. And I think I was about to use again. And I would have gone headlong as well this time. And my younger brother got in touch with me out of the blue. Hadn't seen him for 8 years. And he introduced me eventually to the wonderful, potent plant medicine, psychedelic plant medicine, ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the game changer. They say you're not supposed to make any major life-changing decisions for 3 months. After that, I was in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco. We did two ayahuasca ceremonies in two San Pedro, which is, so ayahuasca being DMT for your audience, San Pedro being mescaline. And 3 days later, I was in my boardroom in London with a team of 10 saying, I'm really sorry, guys, but I'm closing the business after 5 years.
I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out.
But you immediately knew during that experience that was it.
Yeah.
Things needed to change.
I knew things needed to change, but of course, knowing and doing, as we all know, are very different things, right? Sure. And of course, a whole beautiful, turgid pond of terror lies ahead once you realize you've got to make changes like that. And of course, for me, I was under the illusion that my business was my legacy.
Yeah.
My business was my identity. I was so tied up in this thing that the idea of not having it had this, at the time, very ego-led human wondering, well, who the fuck am I? Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
Who the fuck am I if I'm not this business? Who the fuck am I if I'm not this guy who lives in London?
And you're a failure if you give it up.
Totally. All of that nonsense, all of that nonsense, chattering, monkey mind stuff came into me. So as a result, I left. I closed everything down. I sold and gave everything away. And with 2 bags and a beagle, I moved to Bali.
Unreal.
And then, I don't know when that was. It was early 2019. And that was a few years back now, right? 5 years, 6 years.
Wow.
5 years. And then along the way, I spent the first year just not doing any work, but the work.
Sure.
The work of mindfulness, the work of getting well, the work of seeking the truth.
Sure.
About me, you, the planet, the universe, and I onboarded through that because I was very lucky to spend a year doing that without any work, and I onboarded all of that and started to expand upon it in some writing.
Right.
Then I published How to Die Happy, and I started a podcast called How to Die Happy, and then I decided, reluctantly as it was in the first place, because I didn't want to be a coach. No disrespect to coaches, because I am one now anyway.
And there's about 100,000 of them on the island.
Yeah, this is Coach Island, isn't it? I just didn't want to be that. I can't really tell you why I didn't. Maybe it was imposter syndrome. Maybe it was a resistance to, in my late 40s, I'd already done this, I'd already written this book, I'd already started this podcast, I'd already reinvented and died. I died several times. I died before it was my time to die, and as a result created all this incredible space in between to live again. So the idea of a new career was kind of not on the radar. All that to say, I've since done piles of certifications in counselling, psychedelic integration, trauma-informed counselling, compassion-focused therapy, the psychology of Buddhism, you name it.
Would you say that is the work? Like when people say you need to be putting in the work, right, to overcome, circumstances, situations, life experiences like this, where, okay, go out there and do the work. I came to Bali and I did the work. Yeah. Most people assume that it's journaling, ice baths, going and doing yoga a few times a week. Like
Yeah.
I'm really, I'm giving back to my soul, my body. That I would assume that is work in some capacity. But when you talk about like transformative, life-changing work that heals the inner child, that allows you to recalibrate and kind of especially with you going on this new chapter, having left corporate, now coming here, for you to just realign yourself, what did that work essentially involve?
That's a great question. Well, I think the things that you mentioned earlier, journaling, yoga, what was the other thing you mentioned?
Meditations,
I mean,
ice baths.
Ice baths.
Yeah.
There is some things are helpful self-care, and some things are physiological game changers, and some are psycho-spiritual game changers.
Sure.
There is a tendency for a lot of us, when faced with the opportunity of doing the work that you just discussed, to bypass it. And certainly in spiritual terms, there was a concept. The phrase was coined by a psychologist by the name of Wellwood. It's called spiritual bypassing, where we might say, actually, yeah, I'm going to go and start just doing yoga. I'm going to do a pile of yoga, and then someone becomes a yogi. When I say becomes a yogi, actually what I mean is they assume the role, they assume the identity.
Yeah.
So, and we have that phenomenon in Bali. It's quite common, isn't it? The spiritual identity. But the spiritual identity is a phenomenon for anyone on the path, on the journey to wake up, the journey to enlightenment, as some people would call it. But it's a point on the journey where many people might get stuck. What I mean by that is they believe they're there. I am considerably more spiritual.
You've reached the highest level of consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there is unfortunately still that judgment and that it's ego in drag, as Ramdas would say.
Yeah.
So a long answer to your question, there is a thing in the middle. No, it's not even in the middle. Really, it's the beginning. There's a chap called Joseph Campbell who said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek."
Right.
Now that is an invitation really to go on the hero's journey, to do the work, and it's called shadow work.
Right.
The term many people will know derives from the Jungian concept of shadow self, and it is the invitation to turn unto yourself, to turn inwards and to face your darkness, to face your shadows, to face your fear, your anger, your shame, your pain, your resentment, your regret. Those moments, those events. Now, I like to say skipping shadow work's like skipping leg day.
Right.
Which
we don't do that.
Which I'm sure will appeal to your audience. If we skip shadow work, if we skip psycho-spiritual leg day, essentially what we then do is we're piling on everything else. Let's say I'm piling on the yoga, or I'm piling on the breath work, or the ice baths.
There's an imbalance.
For example. Yeah. Absolutely. Shaky foundations. Yeah. And this is the thing we're all to be mindful of, I think. And that is, I'm doing the work. I do ayahuasca every 3 months. I do Kundalini yoga. I do Kundalini activation. Yeah. All of these things, but they never tackled the shadow. They've never. When I say tackled, there's a process of tackling, and then hugging, actually embracing. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think to just extend on that, what would be someone who's listening to this, who wants to go out there and let's say they've had an awakening. It could have been in the workplace where they're like, fuck this, I'm out, this is not for me, I don't want to do this anymore. It could be, whoa, I'm really actually unhappy in this family dynamic, and like I want to leave my partner, my kids, and actually go off and create a new chapter for myself. What would be, let's say, the first introduction for someone to enter shadow work?
That's a great question. Well, I suppose the first thing I would invite someone to do if they were having that sort of realization is to is to try to take them themselves to a place where they can truly make that kind of decision from a place of stillness, from a place of calm, rather than an emotional response.
Right.
You know, this family is...
Fuck this, I'm out, I'm booking a flight right now.
Yeah, this company is, this employer is, you know, because obviously we might then be making a decision from the wrong place. But if someone has decided that they are genuinely sick of their life, and I work with a lot of people, I coach a lot of people like this, and that's using a combination of modalities, of course, which I guess we can talk about in the response to this. My first recommendation is for someone to find a quiet place. And that might be a different country, might be a different town, might be the countryside, in fact. But find a quiet place, because actually the first thing we can do with shadow work, we don't need anything.
Yeah.
You don't need a me, you don't need a you.
You just need solitude.
Yeah, you don't need a book, you need solitude.
Yeah.
Now that sounds really simple, doesn't it? But for many people, and when I use words like ego, it's non-judgmental in the context of this conversation. We all have an ego, and some of us have very, very active egos, chattering monkey minds, as the masters would call them. Now, for me, I love silence. I love a bit of silence.
Same. I'm the exact same.
I love solitude. I love my own company. But for other people, it is the idea,
Complete
the epitome,
opposite.
of hell, right? Yeah.
I can't be alone.
Yeah, I can't be alone. And if I am alone, I must pick up my phone.
There needs to be a distraction. There needs to be some communication or some engagement to just not sit still. Yeah.
So the invitation for shadow work is, no, mate, set it all aside and do the work.
Ego and its impact on happiness, because I know that this is obviously a big theme in the book. You know, how can one recognize when their ego is getting in the way, and what practices do you recommend to step out of ego-driven behavior?
That's another beautiful question. How can one recognize when ego
is getting in the way
of
their happiness?
Well, I suppose the first thing to do would be to understand the space between. Now, our brains are exquisitely designed to act fast. So when we're young, we encounter a stimulus and our brain says, how are we going to respond to that? Boom, there's a response. And then the brain works very quickly to, next time it experiences another stimulus, which might not even be that's the same one, just a similar flavor, to shorten the response time, response time, until such time where, boom, we are reacting without even thinking.
Right.
So that's that. There's no space. We have no space. Now, if you're a 40-year-old man, you've been honing that for 40 years, right? If you're a 40-year-old man who came up as a child having adverse experiences, then your version of that response is going to be very different to someone who grew up in a having a very, let's say, more healthy experience with a more healthy attachment style. So the point is, we all have maladaptive behavioral traits. Most of us are doing things and saying things and even thinking things that we don't even comprehend are within our control. Because we're on autopilot. Yeah. So number one, stop believing you're the voice in your head.
Right.
That's
powerful, yeah.
You are not the voice in your head.
Yeah.
It's really powerful, isn't it? And people tend to say to me, what do you mean? And I say, okay, let's just do a quick exercise. So let's do this with you guys right now. Okay. Empty your mind. Take a nice big deep in breath like we just did at the beginning. Sit for a moment. quietly. Now, you could either do that or you couldn't. And if you couldn't, there was a voice in your head. Did you hear it? If you heard it, then surely you can realize that it wasn't you. You were observing it. So the initial point of understanding our own ego is to see it as separate from our conscious self. So you are not the voice in your head, you're the observer.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, the more of this work you do, you can become the observer of the observer, of the observer of the observer. Once we're able to actually say, I am not the monkey, and I'll never forget this moment for me. I had this very clear image. I like to call the human body, as you know, the Earth rover.
Right, yeah. We're in Earth School.
Right, exactly. We're in Earth School. This is a simulation. Yeah. It's a game. Yeah. The Buddhists call it samsara. It's a very elaborate simulation so that we can have a human experience, and we can talk about that in a whole other way. But our consciousness... So, sorry to back that up. Some people say we're a body with a spirit. I say we're a spirit with a body.
Having a human experience.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is an Earth rover. And I remember having this very conscious moment when I first started to do this work, where I suddenly saw myself in the back seat of the Earth rover, tied up, gaffer tape on my mouth, and there was a fucking monkey driving. And I suddenly realized, there you are. Yeah. There you are, ego. And the moment I had that realization, of course, the monkey saw that I saw the monkey, and then began this beautiful process of freeing myself and saying, get in the passenger seat.
Right. Yeah.
Now, this was a process.
Was this plant medicine induced? Or
no, this was meditation induced, actually,
right.
Yeah. So I wasn't doing a great deal of plant medicine in the early stages. I was working with it, but I just felt it was purer to do the work, to do the shadow work.
As you should before you go into plant medicine.
Unequivocally. Yeah. And we can talk about that till Christmas.
And when you think that you've done enough, maybe you should just do a little bit more.
Just do a wee bit more.
Yeah, before going there.
Yeah, I mean, I picture the scene. I'd moved to Bali. I was living in a villa on the beach. I was lucky that it had a pagoda. And I would probably meditate in that pagoda for around 3 to 4 hours a day. So these meditations took lots of different shapes, sizes, and colours, as meditations can. But I intuited that the work I had to do was just this kind of work, shadow work, picking up these memories, holding on to them, despite the fact that they burned, observing them, then observing multiple perspectives. Oh, actually, yeah, that's probably how that made this person feel. That's probably how this person felt. This is how it looked to everyone. Turns out I'm co-responsible for that. Right, okay, there's a lesson there then, isn't there? Yes, there is. Thank you so much. Off it goes.
Let it go. And
that was my shadow work process. Right. And that's a real simple shadow work process for anybody to crack on with, incidentally. So, and this particular exercise was part of that work. It was suddenly seeing my ego as the chattering monkey, as an alternative voice. Once I'd realised I'm not the voice in my head, that was the beginning of creating that space.
Right.
Now the game, if you want to play it, and I hope people do, because it's very good fun, is to try to create more space, but at the same time reducing or increasing, actually, the space between stimulus and response. Right? So, and you get to the point, and there are many ways to do this as well. The 90-second rule, for example, Dr. Gilbert Taylor did a study that proved that the physiology of an emotion, the physiological response of an emotion is only 90 seconds.
Right.
So after that...
Get through the 90 seconds.
Right. Because after that, it's what you tell yourself.
Right.
It's the experience that you apply to the event, to the stimulus, that suddenly makes it something more than it is. And who's doing that? Ego. So a long way to answer your question, but ego is a part of us. Contrary to the phrase, ego is the enemy, in a way, yes. In so many ways, no. And with the greatest respect to anybody with that mindset, I invite anybody who wants to do this work not to see ego as this dumb monkey who's dragged you through the bullshit for the last 40 years, who suddenly, I am now enlightened, and I shun this, I shun my humanness, I'm now a spiritual being. No. What we need to do is we need to give that monkey a hug and say, thank you, mate. Fuck me. You kept me alive. But you did also nearly kill me. Now I'm talking to my monkey, right? So, looks to me like we've had 4 decades of extreme. We need to work together in a better way. So I'm not saying that I want you to die, ego death, there's a concept, and we talk about that in psychedelic practice. But I do need you to pipe down, and I need you to become my co-pilot. So we're teammates. And I still need you to keep me alive, because, wow, you can do some quite incredible, superstellar stuff.
And I think the ego's got a very incorrect understanding when we look at someone and we say, wow, he's got a big ego.
Yeah, the bravado facet.
Yeah, that's it, right? It's like, oh, well, like, I think people really misunderstand the term itself, right? Because, like, he's full of himself, you know, there's arrogance, but that's actually, I would say, like a 1% of what ego really actually is, right?
Yeah, it's a layer cake, exactly. And an ego, there are different layers of the ego. So that's we're talking about the peacocking, the bravado facet. But yeah, when we talk about ego, we can talk about ego, super ego, and we can talk about the id, the primal instinctual.
For sure. The one that's there to either protect you or to allow you to take charge. You know,
totally that fight or flight responder, but also, which is part of the amygdala's response, also the freeze or fawn response. So that's all part of a very very complex story, aka ego. Some of which we need, but the reality is that the lion's share of us, even if we did not experience trauma of commission, perhaps we were more likely to experience lighter trauma. There are big T's and little T's. Trauma of omission, say perhaps an unpresent parent or a little bit of neglect, or we didn't get the cuddles that we wanted when we needed them, and then our tiny child's brain logged that as something bigger than it effectively is to us now.
Sure.
We all could do with some work around our ego.
For sure. Micro or macro traumas, you know, there's always work that can be done.
Totally. Yeah, and I have this all the time when I talk to clients who say, oh, I didn't really experience any traumas. I had a pretty cool life. And I'm like, that is not amazing.
Possible. Yeah.
Well, I'm
if
happy.
If it is possible, then like,
I'm so happy to hear it. And then, of course, 2 weeks in,
it comes out
into the work, we see their trauma. Trauma is so misunderstood, and it actually, you know what? If you think about it, it's actually only people like, I suppose, if you think about the book "The Body Keeps the Score," Bessel van der Kolk, which is actually a few years old now. Peter Levine, real leaders in how the somatic effects of trauma and the psychological. But actually, recently, people like Gabor Mate, who've only just got the spotlight now, who are actually talking to us about trauma and saying, guys, we've got trauma wrong. We're misdiagnosing it, we're misunderstanding it, because we don't perceive, or haven't in the past, perceived events such as what we've just discussed to actually have a negative or an adverse effect. Sure. But they do. And there's so much science now to prove that actually a child, well, an infant as young as 12 weeks, can actually detect whether or not their parents are.
Were you telling me about this?
Yeah, I think I told you this.
You were telling me about this
over lunch last week.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay, wow. As young as 12 weeks, they can sense through their autonomic nervous system, that nervous system connection between them and their parents, whether or not these parents are going to be are safe places, are safe humans. And when I say safe, that can be just something as simple as dad's on the phone all the time. So dad's not present. And if dad's not present, and I need him to be present, I want to be connected to him, and I need him to give me that hug as and when I need it, then a 12-week-old child can begin to tell
those
themselves
symptoms of detachment to a
right,
parent.
And that's where an attachment style is created. 12 weeks old. There's science to prove in transpersonal psychology trials and studies. There's science to prove that we're onboarding trauma in the womb.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It totally makes sense. Like, and just even that example, it's, as I say, it's a micro trauma. Like let's say just the father being on the phone, or like not being present at home as much. But it's like, well, I don't need to be at home because it's still an infant. I'm trying to provide. I'm not there. But what that compounds over a year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, like that's, that can really all of a sudden become probably the biggest trauma that one will ever be affected by, is not having a present parent, which has such a snowball effect on everything in life.
Yeah, and the science is honing in on that.
Yeah.
So it used to be between the ages of 0 to 8. But the science is honing in now and saying, actually, it's the first 3 years.
Yeah.
So if we are not present parents, if we are not, and that doesn't just mean
in the
put on a show for this kid. If we're not present, if we're not doing the work for ourselves, if we're not therefore expressing that energy subtly or completely unsubtly to our partner,
the
or
effects
to those around us,
are being made.
So that the child is sensing all of that. So if we get that bit right in the first 3 years, we are creating micro Jedis in generational terms. One other thing I wanted to say though, there's plenty of science to prove, again in transpersonal psychology terms, and this science primarily was led by the likes of Stanislav Grof, working with. So you've heard of holotropic breathwork?
Yes.
Well, the phrase was coined by Stanislav Grof.
Okay.
Two Greek words. It means towards wholeness. So this breathwork technique essentially takes us towards wholeness, towards oneness, connectivity, God, divinity, whatever you want to say.
Is this like similar to somatic breathwork? I mean,
yeah. Well, a lot of the breathwork practices we do today are essentially repackaged versions of pranayama exercises that yogis and masters have been
I've gone
doing for
very deep in some breathwork exercises where like I've had some serious visions and powerful experiences that have come through.
Yeah, and that's what I do as well.
Yeah, so is this along those guidelines?
Exactly the same vibe, but we would tradition. So I do something called emotional release breathwork. Excuse me, and we can do micro sessions of that, but with the big chunky stuff, I do a 2-hour session.
Yeah.
Holotropic breathwork, which is I'd say kind of the birthplace of this kind of breathing, in as much as it was already been done by the yogis and masters thousands of years ago, but let's say the contemporary birthplace. They will do these sessions for 2, 3, 4 hours. So you imagine doing what you did, where you had this beautiful awakening. Imagine doing that for 4 hours. When that happens, people have full psychedelic experiences. Yeah. So Groff and his crew started to do studies around people using breathwork, holotropic breathwork, and of course people working with psychedelics. Quite big doses. Yeah. So anybody having a dose large enough to, I guess we could call it a hero's dose in psilocybin terms, but a lot of this was LSD based. He started to notice a constellation, similarities amongst thousands and thousands of people's psychedelic experiences. And that's a whole other podcast. Yeah. But one of these similarities was that people would find themselves either literally in the womb or metaphorically having a womb experience. So they would be floating, they would be underwater, they would be in space, they would be in absolutely beautiful stillness, this amphibian, enjoying this peace like no other. Epic. And suddenly the environment changes and people start to feel cranial pressure.
Does this emulate trauma?
Well, this emulates the first human trauma.
Yeah.
So little do we realise, but actually for many people, the most traumatic thing that could ever happen to you is being born.
Right.
And the science points to
Starts
this.
from day one.
It starts before you're even out of the womb.
Yeah.
And there are what Groff did, he created something called the expanded cartography of the psyche, which really took materialistic Western psychology models and said, yeah, I get that, but what about this, and this, and this? You've got no answers for any of this.
Right.
And that's really where him and the other forefathers of transpersonal psychology created this field of psychology that I'm a student of, and practitioner of. But it's very clear that we experience trauma, many of us experience trauma whilst being born.
Right.
And that, in actual fact, there's a direct correlation with the likes of sociopathy, psychopathy,
Right.
Very extreme sexual kinks.
Okay.
And they can be connected through psychedelic therapy back to being born.
The womb.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucked. It's just,
Yeah, I love talking about trauma.
Yeah, it's wild, man. I think seeing as we're speaking about like life and death, right? Obviously topic of discussion here is how to die happy. So, for me, reading your book, attending your reading, that for me really completely changed my outlook on death. So I would love to spend a bit of time on that because I think it is something that people have this huge fear about that dying day. In your book you discuss the fear of death as something that's deeply ingrained in society.
Yes.
So why do you think this fear is so pervasive, and how can individuals begin to change their relationship with death?
Well, you've already alluded to why we struggle with death so much. Many, many, many civilizations, particularly in the West, have death presented to them as an enemy. and that's in folklore, that's through the media, that's through the medical industrial complex.
It's the thing you don't want.
Right, exactly. It's through religion. Death is the literal enemy. And the greatest respect to medical professionals, their primary job is to keep you alive. So we have, not just in this lifetime, generationally over eons, we've had these stories fed to us by society, by family, by religion, therefore by the collective unconscious, that death is the enemy. Well, it's not. And it's a reality. And the thing that got me when I started to do this work was the more I thought about death, and I embraced death, and there's no coincidence for the timing, having had several what are known as ego death experiences with psychedelics medicines, having come that close to blowing my own brains out, I felt like I had this beautiful relationship with death. And I was inspired by the likes of Sogyal Rinpoche, who wrote a beautiful book called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. There is a much older book called The Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I started to feel into Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, these Eastern philosophies, Hinduism, these Asian and Eastern philosophies that had a very different perspective on death, that welcomed death. Now, the point of this book is in three parts. The first part is dying, the second is living, and the third is being, as you may or may not recall. And the first part is very confrontational, because I spend a fair 100 or so pages telling you you're going to die. And not just that, there's a chapter called Everyone You Know Is Going to Die, part 1.
Yeah.
There's a part 2.
Yeah.
So I make it super, super clear that with the greatest respect in the world, it is an absurdity that something that we know to be 100% inevitable is still shocking us in the way it does.
For sure.
And so what I'm trying to do is essentially point out the obvious. There is one constant in this universe. One, and that is inconstance.
Right. Yeah.
Change, what the Buddhists call impermanence or anicca. Now, if we know that we're all going to die, and we know that mum and dad are going to die, and we know that our brother and sister are going to die, why is it that we're still surprised when it happens?
Yeah.
Now, this is an inconvenient truth.
I've said this to people when they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so surprised he died." I'm like, "Why?
Yeah.
Like, why?"
People die
People,
every day.
I'm halfway through my life. I'm like, that's not true. You could die today.
Right.
And then half your life would have been 15 years ago.
Right. And
Right.
of course, something else a lot of people say is, well, I'm not dying. You are.
You're dying, yeah, from the moment you're born.
You and I are dying right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully not with the audience.
But people look at it as a very morbid
Right.
thing to discuss. And, I think when you've experienced death, or, in your case, you've come close to death,
Yeah.
you stop fearing it, right? I think especially when, I lost my dad, I was like, well, shit.
Reality.
That sucks.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen to me. So, I think going through that experience really put me a lot more at ease. But there was something that you did with us at your reading, and it's something that I've got my journal here because I read this afternoon, and I was like, oh my God, it was the obituary.
Oh, yeah. Write your own, write your own eulogy.
Eulogy, sorry.
Yeah.
Write your own eulogy.
That's one of the chapters.
And when I wrote this, and I sat there and I reflected on how I wanted to be remembered, I almost looked forward to the day that this gets read out.
Well, you need to make sure that somebody gets that book then.
Well, I told one of my best friends, I was like, dude, my eulogy is in this journal.
This journal.
Yeah, that's it. This is the only journal I have left after my dog has completely shredded all my other ones.
Yeah.
But, I read this back, and I was like, wow, I really want to be remembered like this.
Are you going to read your eulogy?
Shall I read it?
I think you should read it.
I'll read it. I've got no worry being vulnerable like that, Okay. And I'll tell you a story after I wrote this. 4 days later, what had happened to me. It just blew my mind. So, okay. Damien was a good person. Imperfect in many ways, he always had good intentions and good nature and heart. Behind closed doors, he struggled to be happy. He never found the peace he was looking for, no matter what country he was in. A testament to Damien's character, he never felt the need to hide who he really was. An open book who sometimes never knew when to shut up. One thing you could always appreciate about him, that he would always articulate how he truly felt, just like his father. Damien had a hard shell, a privileged life, and an upbringing. Didn't stop or mask any of the abuse or trauma that he did endure during his childhood. Damaged goods or not, he tried to prove that despite all the negativity he experienced, he could still show respect to others and be a mensch. Damien lived life to the fullest. He always tried to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And if he couldn't, then at least he knew how to start a fire and stay put, just like his father taught him growing up. Damien will always be remembered for more than just health and fitness, but also the impact he made in other people's lives, personally and professionally. Damien knew how to get the best out of others and make them feel loved, appreciated, and valued. Sometimes he spoke more than he listened, but that never took away from his good intentions. Damien always looked forward to and equally feared the day this would be read out to others. Not because of the message or the words, but because just like most funerals, it would be a day to bring people together, which Damien loved to do. But a sad day because everyone he loves but him would be here. He'll be loving himself up in heaven with his father. A sad day, there's no doubt about it. The world has lost someone who appreciated every breath and moment he was given. You will be missed, legend.
Beautiful.
It's deep, it's fucking deep that's going to be read out one day.
Now, you wrote that a year ago. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Has any of that changed? So we should probably explain briefly.
Yeah.
The challenge that I set to you and the other people in that workshop was to write a gloves-off eulogy, but not from your own perspective, to take on board and to audit the perspectives of all of those people around you, and the plot twist was that that this was gloves off.
Yeah.
So it's not like that
Yeah, it's not the sugar-coated way of I want to be remembered for
right,
only
and
the good that I do.
the
Yeah.
eulogy that we have at most funerals, where sadly at the funerals of people that aren't that popular,
Yeah.
that the vicar or the priest reads, who didn't even fucking know you.
Yeah.
So that was, and I remember being very impressed with that. Do you think that actually if you were writing it again now, it would change?
No. Not.
What about
I think
what
the
about
part
the being at peace? There was something you
yeah,
just talked about at the start.
the part where I think I mentioned, no matter where I am in the world, I won't be truly happy.
Yes.
That, I contextually I came to Bali a year and 4 months ago. So I was here only for like a handful of weeks before writing this.
You're right.
And I came here because I was deeply fucking unhappy.
Uh-huh.
Like I had
remember.
never felt so unfulfilled in my entire life, unsupported, didn't have any friends or family. And, the reason that I felt like that in Dubai was actually how I felt in Portugal before going to Dubai. I went to Dubai to go and, be around more successful people, driven people, people that I aligned with in health and fitness. And Portugal, I was alone. I had no friends, no family. I wasn't happy there either. If we go back before that, I was in Amsterdam with my ex-wife, and I don't think we were 100% happy. And it wasn't because we weren't happy. I think it was because I wasn't happy. So I had this trend of like going from country to country, thinking that like, oh, well, if I go there, this is going to bring me a much more abundant chapter. And you know what, this didn't work out, so I'm going to go there. And like, it led to a point where I was here, and the day that I wrote this, like, that was the first time I've ever gone to a reading. First time I'd ever like made myself vulnerable to be in a group setting, and then to all of a sudden be challenged to write something like this that I'd never done before.
Yeah, and you read it out loud.
Yeah, I've never gone to ground zero like that, so I think I would definitely now, looking back, because I've done a lot of this work in the past year, and it hasn't just been a simple like journal every day. There's been a lot that's happened in the past 12 to 14 months that now I can look back and say, yeah, that's the only thing I would change.
Yeah,
because I am inherently happy.
That was the thought I had when you read it out, and as you were talking about this puddle jumping, trying to find happiness, it reminded me of the expression, "The grass is greener where you water it." And I can relate to jumping out of one frying pan into a fire, and so on and so forth, trying to find something that I wasn't really sure I was trying to find.
Peace is not waiting for you. That's the thing. It's cultivated, and
exactly
it takes work. And
yeah.
that would be the only thing that I would change. But this is where it got weird. Okay, this is where I was like, universe, this like you're freaking me out here, because I wrote that. Then 4 days later, I went to my first breathwork class. I was reluctant to do that as well, because I'm like, no, this is for chicks. Like,
what, breathwork is for chicks?
I was like, breathwork's for chicks. Oh my gosh, no, seriously, I was like, I'm just yoga, breathwork's just not a dude's thing. Like, that's it. Like, that's not my vibe. So, anyways, humbled myself, and I go and do breathwork. And I walk in there, and it was just chicks. Okay, but it was okay because I was there. I'd made it there. 50% of the work was actually just putting myself in that room.
Yeah, well done.
So then do this 2-hour, breathwork session, go really deep. And my first experience with breathwork was experiencing my fucking funeral. And I experienced all my loved ones in front of me, all smiling at me. First was my mom, then it was my brother, then it was my dad, then it was my 2 best girlfriends. And all of a sudden there's like 10, 15 people all there smiling at me. But there's this huge disconnect between us. There's like cellophane between us, where it's like you're so close, but no matter what I say, no matter how much I move, you guys are not responding. Actually, you're all just looking at me smiling. And I got home that night and I was like, did I just experience my fucking funeral? And I called every single person.
Yeah.
I called every single person that was in that vision, because I was like, wow, you wrote it down and you experienced it. And that completely changed everything for me in terms of how I show gratitude to every single person in my life.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. And interestingly, people commonly ask me, why did you call it How to Die Happy instead of How to Live Happy? If you've read it, you know.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I like to say that the secret to dying well lies in the life well lived. And your experience is a wonderful metaphor for the message, and that is, once we reframe our relationship with death, we have no choice but to reframe our relationship with life. And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge that I'm laying down with love, not sort this shit out or you're going to have a miserable time. That's not the point. The point is to say, look, you don't understand. And it's okay, because I didn't, and so many people don't. But we have to get over the idea that death isn't happening. Because the more we treat it as a taboo, morbid you used. The word morbid, by the way, defines an unhealthy fascination
It's such a
with
morbid
death.
word.
Right, but morbid, it's been co-opted. It's been co-opted by ego, and it's been co-opted by ego so many times that it's become a collective,
We think black and grey.
egoic response. And that is, oh no, I don't want to talk about death. You're morbid. So the moment we're talking about death, which means that you might have an introspective moment, of course, ego goes and points at somebody else, right?
Yeah.
You're morbid. No, I'm not actually,
Yeah.
because that means I've got an unhealthy fascination with death. I haven't. I've got a healthy fascination with the relationship between living and dying. And while we're at it, how healthy is it to pretend that death doesn't exist? And then suddenly, when it does,
We're surprised.
We're fucking on our backs.
I know.
Or we're on our knees.
I think that's one thing that I definitely want to kind of like just maybe spend a couple moments on is, and I think I wrote it down here actually, is, the idea of having a more meaningful, fulfilling life that is cultivated through joy and positive experiences, which ultimately leads to a higher level of gratitude, of which then when you're showing a higher level or you're experiencing a higher level of gratitude, the idea of death doesn't really factor into any of that anymore.
No. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, because you completely accept it, right? And it comes through. Actually, the point that I want to go into is the concept of surrender. So
one of my favorite topics.
Right, mine too. So what does that mean? Because I think people also look at the term surrender as like this white flag saying I give up.
Yes. Yeah, exactly that. Well, many people see it as giving up or weakness. And of course, yes, you can see it that way. That is a perspective. So there's no right or wrong here, but there are multi-facets to surrender. I believe that the game of life is primarily nothing but a beautiful roller coaster experience loaded with opportunities to let go. So every day we are invited to let go, surrender. Surrender isn't about weakness or saying you've won. It's about saying, I'm not going to fight. And there's a very significant difference there between I'm going to not fight and I've lost a fight, or you've won. Now, of course, ego has a problem with that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to let you win.
Right, exactly, because I'm going to have one-upmanship and yada yada. But actually, it's got fuck all to do with the other person.
For sure.
True 100%. Surrender. True, beautiful surrender.
So it's within, man.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
So if we shift the perspective, and this is actually very similar to the forgiveness story, you have a lot of people who say, I will never forgive that person ever again. I don't care what happens. I'm going to hold on to that grudge. Well, the Buddha said, when you hold on to a grudge, it's like holding on.
You're carrying it.
Yeah, it's like holding on to a hot coal.
Yeah.
It's only you that gets burned.
Yeah.
So forgiveness isn't anything to do with them. It's to do with letting go of that coal, because you're harming your hand, you're harming your heart, in fact, and you're harming your mind.
It's the same as a dumbbell or weight. You're just piling on all this weight, and you're the one who has to carry it around.
Right, and we know that when we hold on to emotions in this way, we are toxifying the body. So we're in more of a sympathetic polyvagal state, for example, for a lot of the time. And if we're doing that, then we're shallow breathing, we're chest breathing for 5 to 10,000 times a day. So we're flooding the brain with, or rather, the brain is flooding the body with stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. Keep doing that, and you give yourself inflammation. What does inflammation lead to? Cancer,
Illness,
heart disease, dis-ease. So surrender, in that context at least, is very much about removing friction. The Taoists have a beautiful concept known as Wu Wei. And Wu Wei means effortless action. Effortless action.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean saying, I'm going to sit on the sofa and watch the TV. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what Bruce Lee would talk about, being like water. We're talking about surrendering to the flow.
Yeah.
That's where that phrase comes from.
Right. What would you say is a practical way that someone can implement this concept of surrender?
Okay, for me, the number one thing to return to is the words of the Buddha. Now, I've said the Buddha a few times. I'm not a Buddhist, by the way. It's just that, frankly, the more research I did into Buddhism, the more absolute sense it made in terms of giving me a pathway to very good mental health. And despite being thousands of years old, the philosophy of Buddhism, the psychology of Buddhism
today
is so applicable. Now, the Buddha, after he'd been meditating by the Bodhi tree for 40 days and he became enlightened, he was wandering off, and as the story goes, he bumped into a bunch of priests and he gave his first sermon. And in his first sermon, he delivered what are still known as the Four Noble Truths. And in that story, the first noble truth, he says...
I've read this.
This is great. You'll have read it in my book.
Yes. Yeah.
The first noble truth. The world is suffering. Life is suffering.
That's it, yeah.
Birth is suffering.
Accept it.
Death is suffering. Work is suffering. Play is suffering. Everything is suffering. This plane of existence, ironically, would not exist were it not for suffering. The second noble truth is attachment is the root of all suffering. So when we cling, we invite ourselves to suffer. And it's so obvious when you think about it. If I cling on to something. Now, remember we talked about anicca earlier on. We talked about impermanence. Yeah. So we are hopefully in agreement that everything in this world is subject to the same universal law of impermanence, of change.
Right.
These glasses are going to change. Yes, it will take them a while. And of course, it depends on whether or not I leave them outside in the sun or I drop them in the sea. This book is going to change. Because it's made of paper, this body is going to change, deteriorate in its own way, as is the leftover coffee in that cup, and so on and so forth. Everything here is subject to change. We know it. Intellectually, we know it. Yet we still hold on to it. You know, I like to say to people, imagine if there was a car driving past you, and you knew that car wasn't going to stop, or it wasn't likely to stop. Would you hold on to the door handle, knowing it was going to tear your arm out of the socket?
Probably not, no.
Right. Well, that's the same principle. So a really simple practice is to remember that whenever we cling, and that could be to a person, that could be to a parent, could be to a partner, could be to a pet, a child, could be to a job, could be to a bank balance, status, our own health, an idea, an outcome. Whenever we cling to whatever we cling, then beware you're setting yourself up for suffering.
Sure. And it's actually such a simple thing to grasp.
Yeah, but actually, don't grasp it.
No, exactly. That's brilliant. Martin, there's actually a quote that I want to run by you, and I want to get your take on it and maybe a little bit of context on it. True happiness is not found in the pursuit of more, but in the acceptance of enough.
Nice. Who said that? That's good words.
Some legend. But I thought it would be a really good quote to just bring into this conversation. Because I
Yes,
think
true happiness is
not found in the pursuit of more, but in the acceptance of enough.
Yeah.
And that's something I wanted to bring into the idea of surrender, which is acceptance at the end of the day.
Yeah, and non-attachment.
Non-attachment.
Exactly what we've just talked about. And of course, gratitude.
Oh, I brought that in at the right time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gratitude.
That was quite a seamless segue. Well done.
Yeah.
Well, it speaks to a lot of the messages that are in the book and some of which we just touched on. The idea really is, for me, happy is a big word, isn't it? And happy means different things to different people. I think where a lot of people fall down with happiness is that they're chasing it, they're seeking it, they're looking for it.
It's
they
this
think
tangible thing that you're going to wander
I'm just going to do this and then I'll be happy. I'll get around that corner and I'll be happy. I'll just achieve this thing and I'll be happy. And then, of course, we become very goal-oriented. And more often than not, when we're in that sort of blinkered way of living, sadly, we're just destination-focused and we're not enjoying the journey at all. And that's really the message. The message is happiness is already here.
It's here,
It's everywhere. It's in you. So you don't have to look anywhere. You just have to stop. Now, we talked about gratitude a moment ago, but and we talked about impermanence, and there's something I always like to think about when I talk about happiness, and that is, can you be happy all of the time?
Oh, you can.
Right.
You can. That's actually the thing, right? People are conditioned to be believing that you can't be happy all the time. Happiness is this thing that you will achieve.
Yeah.
It's this thing you will come across. But, I think there's a lot of scapegoating to just the generic. You can't be happy all the time.
Yeah.
How dare you be happy all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then we have, because we have had a very like a positive. There's been a wave of sort of false positivity, especially in the self-help space and in the wellness space.
Yeah.
And people are righteous to call that out. But that's not what we're talking about here. Actually, for me...
We're looking at gratitude, right?
Well,
so we're living in gratitude.
Yeah, well, that's a practice. That's a practice. But actually, one of the things that helps me stay happy all the time is knowing that I won't be happy all the time.
Yeah, acceptance.
Right. So if I can accept that happiness is subject to the same universal laws as everything else we've just talked about, impermanence, then I can still be happy.
Yeah.
So there are 4 golden rules, if you like, territories in which I play every day. I'm playfully called this the Zen Ven. Awareness, presence, acceptance, and gratitude. So the mission, but don't make it a mission.
Yeah.
We're talking about surrender earlier on. That's another thing that people get wrong about surrender. They think, I must surrender. No, you're turning it into a
chore,
into a task.
Yeah.
The whole point is to do nothing.
Yeah.
Just be.
That is surrender. Yeah.
Right.
Do nothing.
Just be.
You don't need to go somewhere to surrender. It's like going.
Yeah.
I need to get my steps in today, so I'm going to drive to the gym to walk on the treadmill.
Yeah, exactly. It's the art of surrender is the art of nothing.
Just open the door.
Totally that.
Go for a walk.
And when people say to me, "What do you mean by that?" I say, "Well, okay. Here's the thing. Are you a human doing? What do you mean? No. Right.
So you're a human.
You're a human being.
Yeah.
So just spend a bit more time being. I distracted myself though. So awareness, acceptance, presence, presence and gratitude, different order. If we can play with those 4 concepts on a daily basis, on a half-daily basis, on an hourly, on a half-hourly basis, right down to the present moment, and of course presence is one of those things, then I will 100% guarantee that you can not only attain happiness, but you can sustain happiness. As long as we're agreed on the
On the
concept of what
tenets
happiness
of that,
is.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I've just remembered what I meant to say earlier
Yes.
on. What is surrender? Surrender is discipline. What was the fucking other thing? Discipline. It was discipline last. No, I missed out on
No,
discipline.
I feel like if we could go back in time, you didn't say discipline. Did you say discipline?
No, I didn't.
No,
I
you
said
didn't.
something else, and discipline's the thing I
Surrender
forgot.
is discipline.
Flow.
Flow.
Oh, flow.
Flow.
What is flow? That's why. Right. Okay. What is flow?
Yeah.
Surrender and discipline.
Right.
So, if we imagine we've got two concentric circles of surrender and discipline, right in the
That
center
is
of that sweet spot is flow state.
100%.
You know
Yeah,
what I'm
I
talking
know
about?
all about it.
You apply discipline, but you're surrendering effortless action. You are just in it. You are in it because you love it, because you are fully present with it. That's true surrender. That's not giving up. Anyway, you can edit that back in. But yeah.
I'm like, do we edit anything? Then? You know what I mean? Like, that was actually, that came together perfectly. That came together absolutely perfectly.
Yeah. So, sorry, and you asked me about gratitude. Yeah, I mean, gratitude's a superpower, as I say in the book. Gratitude is an opportunity to create true alchemy, to transmute a feeling, a mood, a whole energy level.
Yeah, from the noise to the silence.
Yeah. And I don't know what we're going to do with gratitude, because there are a lot of people talking about it in a way that doesn't do the work justice.
I feel like it's part of the bypassing basket,
It's become part of a message from a certain
Yeah.
community where, gratitude,
I'm grateful.
practice,
Yeah,
gratitude,
yeah.
I'm grateful.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first heard it, somebody was talking to me back in 2017 about gratitude practice being the epicenter of mindfulness and transformation. And I said, you can fuck right off. And then fast forward to 2019 when suddenly I'm doing all of this work and I realize the alchemic power of gratitude. Sure. I wished I'd be able to go back to that person and apologize, because I remember saying something very childish and egoic in response to it. But it is a superpower.
Sure. And
when applied practically, it can completely and utterly change your physiology, your energy levels.
Completely.
And it's where manifestation comes from. It's from the heart center. And so when we really grasp gratitude, really truly grasp it, not just intellectualize it, journal it. Yeah. I'm not dissing journaling,
Yeah. No, but I mean, I actually lost my interest in journaling because I was overdoing the idea that I needed to be. I had to show that I was grateful. Yeah. Right. I had to show it. I had to put it in writing. I had to have this intention to ink it on the paper. Then I started to lose interest.
Well, then it becomes a chore, doesn't it?
It became a chore, and I stopped being grateful for it because it felt like a task.
Yeah, as opposed to part of the daily practice. Actually, one of the simple things I was shown by my partner, who's my mindfulness North Star, Julia, and she co-hosts our podcast with us, and we do this from time to time. We don't do it all the time, which is the point. But she'll just say to me out of the blue, "What 3 things are you grateful for today?" What 3 things are you grateful for today?
I'm unbelievably grateful that my mom is coming here next month.
Exciting.
I am grateful that I am in Bali with incredibly kind people that show me love every day, and it just makes every day worth living, because I from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, I am happy here. Like the culturescape, the food, the respect that people have for each other here, like everything just really makes my days better. And I'm extremely grateful for my dog, because she brings Penny. She brings so much love into my days. So, I don't think about tomorrow. I don't think about yesterday. Like, it's just, these are things that I'm really happy about today, and I'm super grateful for them.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Now, when you tapped into that and you started to share that, I felt that in my heart center. So when we articulate so simply, such a simple practice, when we
actually has this
articulate the thing we're grateful
contagious
for,
energy to other people.
absolutely it does. You are thinking about in real time how much love you have for this thing, this person, this place, this time, this experience. And you are, so you're not, it's not an intellectual thing, it's a feeling. That is true gratitude practice. And I think people might misunderstand this. True gratitude practice is to cultivate the feeling. And you feel it in your heart center, and it starts to, your heart chakra starts to just expand.
Like I felt that when I speak about it, I'm like, oh my God, like actually how awesome is it that I have all those things? Like I'm here, I have my mom coming here, I've got a dog that I am its world. Like how fucking great is that I am privileged enough to have those things in my life. You know,
I love that.
That's a feeling that I can't even explain.
It's and this is what I think. This is where the conversation about gratitude needs a little bit more articulation, because there are folks out there who have had a story. They've had a turbulent story. Perhaps it began for them. They didn't have a choice about how that story loaded up. They certainly have a responsibility now for what happens and how they do it. But there are people who will hear a conversation like this and say, "Oh, it's all right for you, you fucker, blah blah blah."
Yeah, my life was fucked.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You haven't got this. You haven't got that. You haven't. This didn't happen to you. And now that's not to.
No one's taking away from that.
No, my work as doing trauma informed counselling and coaching. I deal with people who have had the worst things happen to them, right down to sexual abuse as children. So this is not to take away from a suffering story.
100%.
But what it is to do is to say, look, do you want that to remain your story, or are you ready to change? Because you can. Yeah. My own childhood was colourful. It's in the book. So I was one of those people as well who would say, "Oh, it's all right for you talking about gratitude." But the point I'm trying to make is, in the end, there is always something. I've had people say, "I've got fuck all to be grateful for."
I hear this often. Yeah.
Right, and I say, I hear you. Yeah. And of course we have to divine whether or not that's a truth, or actually they're just irritated to hear see somebody else who is grateful. Yeah, it's a limiting belief, but ultimately, you can write down to every morning when I get up and get out with my dogs, the first thing I do is I look to the sun and I put my hands on my chest and I just take several big deep breaths and I thank the sun
for life.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'd be a bit fucked without it. We wouldn't have the opportunity to wake up every day and rock up to this fucking insane existence.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which, on the one hand, is giving all of this incredible beauty and love and happiness. On the other hand, it's throwing fucking curveballs and cancer. And, this is life. I love life for the good stuff and the bad stuff. Yeah. Good stuff and bad stuff. Yeah. That's a matter of perception, isn't it? But I mean, what better thing to do than to thank the sun? What better thing to do than to thank your lungs?
Yeah. Do you know what's a crazy concept?
Thanks, lungs!
From the day that you are born, so let's say you have an average lifespan of like 80 years, whatever it is, right? How crazy is the concept that from, a couple of weeks, your heart's beating? Yeah. And it never stops beating. It never. It's like it never takes a rest. It never goes in for a service like a car or a scooter, where they have to put it off and fix things up. It's like,
well, some people do.
Well, some people, but like and then there's But the thing is, if all goes well, right? Like even sometimes you're in bad health, it doesn't shut down. It still keeps going. Your heart it never stops pumping blood until that average old age, and like I just find that is like the craziest concept that like within you have got the thing that nothing in humankind has in terms of creation, right? Like we can create a car, right? But the car needs to go in for service. It needs to be put off sometime.
Yeah.
We can create these machines and batteries and phones and this and that, but all these things need a reset sometimes. So they all need to be charged up. Whereas like we keep ourselves charged.
Yeah.
And
super intelligent biotechnology.
We are the most advanced piece of technology ever.
Yeah.
And that can be so enhanced and so supercharged, and you can charge up your battery so much more when you're showing gratitude.
Right, and it does actually have, studies have shown that a gratitude practice
you live longer.
Does have a physiological
You live longer. That's fact.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's a really good point. And actually, just speaking to that point directly, how often do we thank our heart?
I thank every meal that gets put in front of me.
Same here.
I'm not religious, right? So I don't
it's not about that.
Exactly, but I'm like, I'm going to enjoy the hell out of you. I'm so grateful that I can afford to have food on the table.
Yeah.
And it's got nothing to do with religion. For me, it's really just like, wow, like I've got a roof over my head. That's epic. I'm doing it by myself. I'm not getting money from my family.
Yeah.
And even if I did, nothing wrong with it. But like I am self-sustained.
Yeah.
And like that is great. I am watering my own garden at the end of the day, and that goes back to what we say, right? The grass is greener where you water it. So, just to be grateful for these are things, right? Like if let's say someone has a really bad backstory, sure, you've got major amounts of trauma or sexual abuse, or in my case, there was a ton of physical abuse from my father, and I could use all of that as like my reasoning to not be grateful and say, well, fuck, all went well for me in my childhood. That was my foundation of a really unhappy existence now. But I'm so grateful for that. That was the experience that I went through because it made me who I am today.
Yeah.
That's actually it. And I know that when someone hears that, they're like, well, it's a lot easier said than done. That must be nice, right? But you have to... gratitude is just one of those things that like you can't explain to someone. They need to experience it, and once they experience it.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. So hopefully the folks listening to this have heard at least 2 micro practices you can do to experience it. Because once you activate that and you feel it, you want more.
Yeah.
And actually the more work you do around that, you realize that you're actually sending out a frequency.
A good vibe.
Yeah, you are, like literal frequency, which will come back your way. So this is what the concept of the law of attraction talks about, which is a whole other conversation. But just to speak to the person who has that story. We all do. And we've all got a story, a trauma story. Some of us have got really bad ones. Some of us have got walk in the park ones. The point is, there is an invitation to become something new. Yeah. And until such time as people are willing to say, all right, I'm over this. This, I can now see that my story, my experience, my trauma, all it does is create chaos. Broken relationship, hand grenade over the shoulder on the way out, hand grenade in before I get in, just to create chaos, because actually there is a part of me that only functions in chaos, because that was my childhood, right? So the idea of changing that after 20, 30, 40, 50, I mean, I speak to people in their 60s, after that amount of time is terrifying. Of course it is, because it's back to the original conversation, change. But my invitation, and it's slap bang right through the thread of this book, is choose change. And the reason why is because I know without a shadow of a doubt, beyond personal experience, but with my own clients, with my communities around the world, that when we do embrace it, and we do decide to finally transmute our suffering, then it becomes the beginning of a beautiful journey. Sure. And for many people, actually, the first time you've truly lived.
Wild. It's a beautiful feeling, though.
Yeah, isn't it? But like Lao Tzu said, journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Single step, yeah.
Right, and so just as you, with your podcast and your work, and the people around you, fully understand the importance of habit to push through that barrier, and muscle memory. Let's talk about that for a moment. Well, we have to do that the same over here when we're talking about psycho-spiritual work.
Sure.
The brain,
Yeah.
and we didn't used to know this, but the brain is neuroplastic. There is neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
It's a concept. So we can rewire it. We can create new neurons. We can repair neurons. We can create new pathways and repair old pathways. There is no such thing as it's too late.
Yeah.
You can teach an old dog new tricks. A leopard can change their spots. So those ideas are not just outdated. They've been out-scienced.
Yeah.
You know?
Can a leopard change its spot?
Metaphorically.
I'm like, what?
An old dog can change its spots.
An old dog can change its spots. Yeah.
Imagine if there was some noetic science study, like real niche study, where a leopard, maybe like 100 like Tibetan meditating monks just changed the spots.
Just one spot, yeah. Brilliant.
Where the fuck did the spot go?
That's amazing.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, there is no science to support that. It's let's just stick with the metaphor.
For sure. Look, we're obviously, pressed for time, but there's one thing that, I just want to kind of like touch on and go back to the very beginning, when it comes about, speaking about your book and the impact that it had on me, because honestly, I don't ever want to say I was unhappy, I was depressed, but I felt lost, right? And there was the more superficial gratitude than there was like the deeper understanding of gratitude for myself, and I do want to put a plug on this, because like your book seriously was a game changer for me. And it really, like, I've sent a copy back to South Africa, I've sent it back with a friend, I've told him to read it, afterwards give it to my mom so that she can read it. Now she's bringing it back from South Africa next month. She said she's got the book already in the suitcase. So, I just really want to kind of just say your book changed the game for me, changed my life. So I just want to say thank you, for writing it and for making such an impact. I want to find out from you, what is the one thing that you want people to walk away with after reading your book? What is the one key message that you want to convey to people?
Well, we've already touched on it, and that is the theme. When I wrote the book, I knew this book, by the way, since we're plugging it, I knew that I needed a theme, and so I defined the theme before I wrote it to ensure that I then kept on track with it. And the theme is choose change. Ultimately, if we can grasp the fundamental reality of impermanence, and I mean really get our heads, embody it, I believe we can change the world. And I know that's a real big thing to say, but we have been going around in circles for hundreds, nay, thousands of years now, believing that we are this. This is all we are. Believing that consciousness, for example, is created and housed only inside here. We do not realize our superhuman potential. We do not realize our, that we're God. And when I say that word, there's no religious reference, none whatsoever.
I think that's a belief in its own, right?
Right, exactly. It's energy, and it's and so we're limiting. We live in this place with this media, with these corporations, with this cabal of organizations that actually it serves for us to believe we're tiny ants, insignificant ants. And it serves certain organizations for us to believe that we are all separate, and that my gender or sexual or
separates me from everyone else,
race or religion position makes me different or better than you. So the more and more we live in this life where we are conditioned and encouraged and enthused to be separate, the further away we are from the truth, and that is that we are from oneness.
We're one. Yeah.
We are from unity.
Yeah.
We are from unity consciousness. And actually, that's the second message, I think, from the book, and that is, if you could grasp the interconnectedness of it all, and you can, doing shitloads of the practices that are in the book, actually, then you can see that actually the challenge in this game, samsara, is to learn how to love, to be one in a realm of separation. And that's very much one of the key messages in the book. Amazing. Learn to love. Yeah. Learn to truly love. Not codependent love.
Yeah.
To become.
To not just say frequency. The word.
Yeah, totally. And it all begins here, not out there. So, I think one of the earliest quotes in that book is a Rumi quote. Rumi beautifully once said, "Maybe you are searching among the branches for what may only be found in the roots." So profound, and speaks so much to the self-help space and to the wellness space, and that the bypassing piece that we were talking about earlier on, but also life in the matrix, distraction, consumption, for sure. Mindless pursuit of success, grab, eat, drink, fuck,
everything
snort.
You need is within.
Yeah, totally. So it's just all we have to do is turn inwards.
That's it.
And then start to do the work on the roots. But that's where the magic happens.
It's also where the hardest work is.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
it's harder than any job you'll go.
Nobody wants to do that shit.
It's harder than any. That's it. It's like I've done. The longest I've meditated for was about 3 hours.
Yeah. And
that was fucking difficult.
Well, it is.
But like every minute got easier the deeper that I got into it, right? Like by the third hour, I was like, okay, the hardest part was just sitting still for 60 seconds, actually. Then it got, okay, you know what, I would say for the first hour, like you start cramping, body's like getting a little bit stiff, you know, but surrender to it, accept it, you know, and go with it. Right?
Go with it. There's a part of, one of my teachers is a beautiful Balinese healer called Pakumerta Ada. Okay. And he very famously healed his own cancer using a meditation technique. And he teaches that meditation technique. So he's taught hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, when you take into account the online and the groups and the TV stuff that he's done. But we go to the jungle and we do a week-long silent meditation retreat.
Vipassana.
It's not Vipassana, but it's, same concept. Yeah. So Vipassana is 10 days, this is 7 days. And this is this is his meditation style. It's a model, really combines Buddhist and there's probably more Buddhist and Chinese medicine stuff. But the idea is that, part of that process is to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. You wake up, in this place, you wake up at 4:30. Dong, 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 dong. Complete silence.
Right.
No books, no journals, no pens, no paper, no phones, no TVs, no nothing. So complete silence. We don't even look at each other. Yeah. So we sit opposite each other at breakfast, but we look out and we focus on something. Yeah. We focus on just mindfully eating. We walk around the grounds and we just watch ourselves walking gently, mindfully. 4:30, dang, 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 straight in for a 45-minute meditation. Then, if I recall, I think we do some chi exercises, then you have some breakfast, and then meditate again, and then some more chi exercises, and then you meditate for a few hours, and then you have some lunch and blah, blah, blah. All the way up to 9:30
To the Western mind, this just seems so not fun.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and I got to say, the first time I did it, I'd already done quite a lump of internal work, and I'd been working with plant medicine as well, but it was still my monkey mind was not
Looking for
content.
distraction.
Yeah, well, it was actually more. It came out in the physical, which is quite common. So when you meditate for any period of time, the monkey starts kicking off,
Yeah.
and the monkey will kick off in whichever way.
What the fuck? I don't want to sit still.
My knee hurts. I
Yeah.
don't want to sit still.
That's it, yeah.
There's a fly on my nose. I've got an itchy ear.
Yeah.
That guy's breathing's doing my head in.
Yeah.
You know, blah 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 blah
I've
blah
experienced
blah
that,
blah
yeah.
blah. So actually, for me, I've got this shoulder issue that I've had for years, and some sort of trauma that I need to clear from a past life, I would imagine. But my shoulder was barking, and by the end of the sixth day, it was screaming. I was in agony, and I wasn't doing anything. I was just sitting there, just meditating. But the breakthrough was absolutely phenomenal. I digress anyway. Apologies.
Yeah. No worries. It's a good story. But there are really interesting stories in your book. Your life story is unbelievable. And I just want to actually maybe even ask you to just mention where people can find your book, where they can find you, if they want to get in touch with you as well.
That's a great idea.
Yes.
I completely forgot about that. So the book is available in paperback, audio, and ebook. So basically, you can get it anywhere. You can get it on Barnes & Noble, you can get it on Amazon. You can ask your local store to buy it if you'd rather do that, and then they'll get it in. In Bali, it's for sale in loads of places.
Dude, I've gone to a few places and I'm like, oh my God, the book is here. Like, is that a sign?
Yeah, it still blows my mind. It's like I'll just be sitting in a cafe and just see somebody reading my book, and I'm always tempted to sort of go up and say, how is it? And obviously,
You don't want to gloat, but also it's like...
Well, no, which they might say it's dog shit, actually. This guy's deluded. And I always fantasize about how amusing that might be, just to say, right, yeah. What do you make of the author? Total idiot.
Yeah.
Okay. Should I buy it then? No way.
Definitely not.
Thanks.
1-star review.
Thanks. You just saved me 20 quid.
Yeah.
But it's for sale all over Bali. And in terms of how you can find me on martinotoollewriter.com. You can find me on Instagram at martinotoole. You can find me on psychedelic-integration.coach. You can find me on the How to Die Happy podcast. And very shortly you'll find me at martinotoole.coach as well. So
is that what we decided on?
I'm just this thing's just become what it is. This story has become something, and then I sort of looked around at it and realized I'm doing all of this stuff. It's everywhere. I need to somehow bring it into a stable to make it a little bit easier to talk about.
martinotoole.coach.
Yeah, that's got a simple ring to it, hasn't it?
That's it. Dude, I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. And I think we need to jump on another episode. There's a lot more.
Would love to.
There's a lot more, actually. Like, we didn't even touch on, I think, the one area that I'm still getting very used to, and that's obviously a part of your experience as well, which is the plant medicines.
Yes.
And, I think that's definitely something I would love us to do an episode 2 on.
Well, I can talk about plant medicine until the cows come home. So it's really crucial that people like you are offering platforms to have this conversation.
I think they're very taboo conversations outside of this space, but I don't find it a taboo subject.
No.
Like, I'm very transparent about the fact that I do like mushrooms. I have gone on the ayahuasca and DMT experiences, and like there've been some incredibly life-changing breakthroughs that have come through that. So I don't look at it as drugs. I don't look at it as, these things that you should be scared of. I think they should be things that you should do when you're ready.
Yeah.
But, I would love to spread that message, and the more credible sources that I can have and people that have done the work with that, I would love to give a platform to that. So
I'd love to have that conversation. There are some golden rules around psychedelic use.
Yeah, for sure.
And if people followed those, we'd totally change the space immediately.
For sure. Dude, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All the fucking love for you, my brother. Yeah, legend.
Thanks, bro.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time, the effort, the energy to join us on today's episode. Really, really appreciate it. And myself and Martin are definitely going to be doing a round 2, as we just mentioned. So please make sure that you're subscribed and that you're following for the next episode. I'm going to drop all of Martin's information as well into the description below. So please feel free to give him a like, love, share, and buy his book, because it is absolutely life-changing, to say the least. I know it changed my life. All right. Lots of love. Thank you, guys. Ciao. Rockstar.